This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our Daily Dose podcast, covering all about day-to-day global affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.
Hello, and a very good evening to everyone who is joining us from Sydney and around the world. On behalf of the Ultimate Global Podcast, I would like to welcome you all to today's Gandhi Jayanti celebration, which is in collaboration with UNSW Sydney. And I would like to thank everyone, including UNSW, for coming together for this particular collaboration and making this event a big event for us and reaching out to a larger audience. And I'm sure that you will get a lot of things to take away from this particular session. Before we begin today's session, I would also like to showcase you some pictures from today morning where Professor Jayashree Ravi Shankar had been involved in the garlanding of the Gandhi's bust at UNSW Sydney. These are some of the pictures from early morning where Professor Jayashree had, along with Dr. Neville, had visited the Gandhi's bust in the UNSW campus, which has now been there for around 12 years on campus. And I will be passing it on to Professor Jayashree, where she will explain you more about this thing, and she will take you through the other things of the event as well.
Thank you, Saurabh. Good evening, everyone. I first offer my acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of the various lands in which you are all participating in this virtual event. Greetings to everyone gathered here on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. Special welcome to the members of the Office of the Consul General of India in Sydney, UNSW India Country Director and former Consulate General of India in Sydney, Mr. Amit Dasgupta, our special guest of honor, Dr. Neville Roach, who was a patron of the Australia-India Institute at UNSW, was an officer of the Order of Australia in 2000, and the recipient of the Praveshi Bharatiya Samman Award, which is India's highest honor for overseas Indians from the President of India. A pleasure to welcome you, sir. It is also our pleasure to welcome the Ultimate Global Podcast co-founder, George Mavros, students contributing to the panel discussion today, all members of UNSW staff and students, members from other universities, and all others who are watching this event live. I heartily welcome you all to celebrate this momentous day along with us. Today is the 152nd birth anniversary of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who is also famously referred to as Mahatma Gandhi. We celebrate this day with great enthusiasm every year to pay tribute to the father of the nation. Due to the pandemic last year and this year, we have gone virtual. Gandhiji was the man of simple living and high thinking. He devoted his life in working towards spreading awareness about the importance of equality, peace, and harmony. His principles and values still hold a great value today, and we are here to revisit the principles through which he led his life. The program today includes video messages by UNSW Vice Chancellor Professor Ian Jacobs and the Consul General of India in Sydney, Mr. Manish Gupta. Inaugural address by Mr. Amit Dasgupta, special address by Dr. Neville Roach, panel discussion on the relevance of Gandhian values in the 21st century, and musical tributes to Gandhiji. I now request Saurabh Kora, who is an UNSW Business School student, also the CEO and co-founder of Ultimate Global Podcast, to host this event. Over to you, Saurabh.
Thank you so much, Professor Jayashree, for those wonderful remarks and taking us through the basics of the event now and running through the run sheet for the audience. So firstly, we are going to begin with the welcome remarks coming from the President and Vice Chancellor of UNSW Sydney, Professor Ian Jacobs. And after that, we will also play the message from His Excellency Consulate General of India to Sydney, Mr. Manish Gupta. And after that, I will pass it on to the former Consulate General and UNSW India Director Amit Dasgupta. So I will now be playing the welcome message which has been given to us by the UNSW Vice Chancellor.
Warm greetings to all on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. I acknowledge the Consul General Manish Gupta and Director of UNSW India Amit Dasgupta, who will also be addressing you later today. And I thank the team from UNSW and Ultimate Global Podcast for bringing us together virtually for this celebration of a truly amazing life. I'm only sorry we cannot be together in person. It is a source of great pride for UNSW Sydney that a bronze sculpture of Mahatma Gandhi has a place of prominence on our campus. It's a constant reminder of Gandhi's commitment to humanity and to the importance of education in shaping a better world. It also symbolises the close relationship of our university with the New South Wales Indian community. We can only hope that the library lawn over which this great soul watches will once again be alive with the movement and sounds of our students who make up a vibrant, diverse community, our valued friends from India amongst them. There is no doubt the pandemic has challenged all of us these past 18 months, and it continues to do so. As divisions in global society have become more pronounced, there's never been a greater need for inspiration than right now. Mahatma Gandhi, a source of enormous wisdom and vision, can be that inspiration. His lessons of peace, racial equality, universal brother and sisterhood, and satyagraha, truth and firmness, are just as relevant today as when they were first taught. The values inherent in those lessons are what we commemorate each year as we mark the birth of Gandhi, and I hope will guide us through the time in between. I wish you all a very happy celebration of Gandhi Jayanti.
Dear friends, faculty members, I am delighted to join you today on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. We also celebrate this day globally as the International Day of Nonviolence. We have a proud association with the University of New South Wales. It holds a very special significance for us. The bust of Mahatma Gandhi was unveiled in this university more than a decade ago. It's indeed heartening for me that today we are organizing a panel discussion on this occasion. Mahatma Gandhi was a great visionary. India achieved its freedom under his leadership through two very unique instruments, truth and non-violence. India's freedom struggle inspired several countries in Asia and Africa who were emerging from the colonial yoke at that point of time. He was a man who practiced what he preached. His entire life embodies the importance of spirit, compassion, tolerance in our lives. Gandhiji was born in India, but he belongs to the entire humanity. He was a humanist, a pacifist to the core. Martin Luther King Jr. had once said, if humanity is to progress, Gandhi is inescapable. We may ignore him at our own risk. As today humanity emerges from the dark shadows of the COVID pandemic, perhaps it is high time for all of us to self-reflect, introspect on our future way of life. Gandhian thoughts on the importance of sustainable development, environment, sanitation, cleanliness are perhaps more relevant than ever before. Mahatma Gandhi had said, Earth provides enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. It is such a profound message. He was a person who was accustomed to a very simple way of life. you always believed that the means should always be as good as the end itself. Today, as the humanity faces an existential crisis due to climate change, perhaps it is high time for all of us to revisit his life and imbibe his principles. It is important that we live in perfect harmony with Mother Nature. It is also important for us to build resilience into our rural communities and make them self-sufficient. I look forward to a very engaging panel discussion today. I wish you all the best on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Professor Ian Jacobs, as well as to the Consulate General of India to Sydney, Mr. Manish Gupta, for their wonderful words. And as Gandhi said, that there is enough on this planet Earth for everyone's need, but not enough for anyone's greed. And what a wonderful, human being he was. And he has been giving those lessons which are still relevant. Some of those lessons are still relevant even in the 21st century. I will now be passing the floor on to the former Consulate General of India, Mr. Amit Das Gupta, who is also the current UNSW India Director, to speak a few words before we move to Dr. Neville Roche.
I'd like to begin by congratulating Professor Jayashree Ravi Shankar and Saurabh for having taken this extraordinary initiative to keep the commemoration of Mahatma Gandhi alive. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency, the Consul General of India, the Honorable President and Vice Chancellor of UNSW, all the faculty members and students who are attending and participating in this program. I would further like to acknowledge the presence of Neville Roche, who was the very first recipient of the Prabhasi Bharatiya Samman Award in Australia. Neville has played a strong and stellar role in the commemoration of the event since the very first year when the Gandhi bust was installed at the university campus library lawns. And if I remember correct, it was in the year 2011. 10 years have gone by, 11 in fact. And to hold this program year after year, despite the challenging pandemic, reflects, in my view, a commitment of all the students and the faculty. But it also reflects the commitment. So I'll start with Gandhiji's quote. So Gandhiji had once, very simply, very humbly, had said, "It always intrigues me how so many people derive so much pleasure from causing so much harm to so many of their brothers and sisters." I think what Gandhiji was trying to say was that the kind of world we live in, and world is of course a very big word, the society, the external space that you and I inhabit, in this kind of a space, it is possible for us to work towards those facets of our life that improve human consciousness. And these are very simple things. It is like talking about tolerance, talking about love, talking about brotherhood, about nonviolence, about the ability to ask ourselves very deeply whether what we are doing would change and improve the life of the hungriest, most marginalized person we have met. I think these simple precepts, as Professor Ian Jacobs was saying, and so indeed the Honorable Consul General, These simple precepts are critical to human life, human civilization, and indeed our existence. The issue of the pandemic, for instance, what has amazed me is to be able to see the extraordinary manner in which doctors, nurses, paramedic staff, administrative staff in hospitals and elsewhere, whether these are government hospitals, whether this is a clinic in a rural area, the manner in which they have actually raised the game. I know of doctors who've been sleeping on the floor, people who have just become mothers who have not seen their children for months on end. This extraordinary sacrifice, they actually don't see it as sacrifice. They see it as their duty, as part of the oath they have taken, and part of their inner spirit, which says that it's our job to try and help whom we can. Do we always succeed in our endeavors? I don't think so. There are occasions when we fail, when we stumble. But I think what Gandhiji was trying to say in his own humble way was that unless you've tried, you will never know. The whole issue of climate change, which Manish raised, about Gandhiji's saying, Gandhiji's thought actually. He said, my life is my message. So it was not just the thoughts that he left behind, but the fact that he lived a life in which every one of those thoughts was converted into action. And he said that the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And I think there is a friend of mine, and I thought I'd mention this, who lives in Sydney. And he wrote a book which he gifted to me. And the title of that book has always moved me. The title is, How Much is Enough? How much is enough? When do we tell ourselves that I think I have enough? I don't need any more. That is a question that challenges many of us. Gandhiji's frugality was a testimony to his having decided he had enough. And I think, brothers and sisters, as this day goes by, one of the important messages perhaps that through the effort of Jayashri and Saurabh and the panel discussion is how do we internalize the thoughts of persons like Gandhiji? How do you internalize the thoughts of a person like Mother Teresa, Swami Vivekananda, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks? How do you internalize all this? How do we change the world that we live in? And should we remember great leaders only on their birth anniversary? I leave with you a thought that I was present when the bust was installed on the Gandhi lawn, on the UNSW lawns. And the architect who was making the pedestal, he and I had long conversations. He was a professor at UNSW. And he said that, I've been reading Gandhiji's thoughts and his life because I didn't just want to design a pedestal. If you visit the bust, you will know better as to what I'm saying. He said that, to my mind, this was a person who never looked down on people. This was a human being who was frail, who was referred to by the British as the naked fakir. This person, he tried to bring everyone together. So I don't want a pedestal where Gandhiji is looking down on the audience. If you visit the bust, you will find that the pedestal is at a lower level than you if you're standing up. If you're standing, that pedestal is a few inches lower. And when I had the bust installed, thanks to the government and the people of India, I remember that graduation had taken place. And it moved me to tears to watch students from UNSW, from Korea, from Vietnam, from Somalia, and from many other places standing around the bust, many with their arms around Gandhiji's bust and getting photographed. That for me was a very, very moving sight. Gandhiji came from India. The installation of the bust, which is at UNSW, simply symbolizes that he now belongs to each and every one of you. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor and a great pleasure. And once again, my congratulations to Jayashree and to Saurabh for this initiative. My gratitude to Professor and President, Vice Chancellor Ian Jacobs, to my friend Manish Gupta, Consul General of India, to the Honorable Neville Roach, and for all of you who are attending this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amit sir. That was, those were the amazing words that Gandhi spoke. But before we move to the panel discussion, I would now invite Dr. Neville Roach to give the welcome message to the people who are listening to us today.
I'd like to start by welcoming my good friend, Excellency Amit Dasgupta, Director of UNSW India Country Director. Also, if he is listening, His Excellency Manish Gupta, Consul General of India in Australia. Vice Chancellor Professor Jacobs, if he is listening, a warm welcome to him as well. I'd like to congratulate Associate Professor Jayashree Ravishankar, who has organized today's program, and Saurabh and partner for putting the technology together. I would really like to congratulate UNSW on being able to run this event in the midst of all the problems that that we have as a result of the pandemic. I think Gandhi faced many obstacles in his life, and he may have faced even pandemics like the flu and things like that, but no obstacles ever stopped him from achieving what he set out to achieve. He went ahead no matter what. And I guess UNSW today is doing that, is exactly that. I can't imagine how difficult it has been for all of you, but Gandhi would have been proud with your efforts. I would like to also pay tribute to my good friend Amit. I know he's a modest person and he doesn't want to publicize all that he himself has done, but I think I owe it to him and to all of you to know a bit more about his contribution. Many of you will be unaware of the foundational role he played in what has led up to events like this. I was with him when he offered the Vice Chancellor then, Fred Hilmer, the gift of this magnificent, beautiful, unbelievably beautiful bust of the Mahatma, and Fred immediately accepted that. That is the first ever statue on this campus and the first Gandhi statue in New South Wales. And the rest, as they say, is history. The Mahatma has now been joined by two other apostles of peace, Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. I hope and I pray that we will soon see them joined by an indigenous female leader that would complete the quartet of great people that our country and the world owe so much to. Talking about indigenous leaders, I should really have started by acknowledging the Bejigal people of the Eora Nation, the sovereign nation on whose land today's event at UNSW is being held. Gandhi, as you know, was somebody who loved and cared for disadvantaged people, and his hat would have gone out to the indigenous people of Australia, of whom I think are among the most disadvantaged and the most people. They have faced more problems as a result of their nations being invaded and of all of us coming here to occupy their country. They handle all this with the greatest of grace and good humor. They are really a remarkable people, and Gandhi would have loved them, and he would have done everything he could to improve their lot in life. They deserve better, and they've issued a wonderful statement called the Uluru Statement. I hope that all of you who are listening today will support the creation of voice that they have asked for in the Australian Constitution. I look forward to hearing the remarks of the distinguished panel of speakers, but I thought I should say a few words, somewhat repetitive of some of the things Amit has said, but with a different accent. I thought I should say a few words on how very ordinary people like me can draw inspiration from the Mahatma, one of the greatest men who ever lived, and of whom the other great man, or other person who's among the greatest who've ever lived, the great Albert Einstein, who said of him that the time will come I'm sorry, I've got myself into a bit of bother. Yes, he said, generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth. I'd like to say how a person of that eminence can inspire ordinary human beings like me in our daily lives. For me, the greatest inspiration is his integrity, his commitment to the truth. He called his life story My Experiments with Truth. His lifelong pursuit of Satya, or truth in Sanskrit, and his fight for freedom was called Satyagraha, or Truth Force, the non-violent movement that overcame the overwhelming armed strength of the British. We too can aim to pursue truth in our daily lives and teach our children to do the same. We too can urge our government towards a non-violent approach in dealing with the real or imagined enemies that we currently seem to believe we have, instead of pursuing the mindless arms race, which has just now gone nuclear. I realize, of course, that most of us are minor players and have very limited impact on matters of national and international import. But here too we can learn from Gandhi. When an Englishman said he approved of Gandhi's non-cooperation, but dreaded the consequences that may follow complete success, that is the evacuation of India by the British, Gandhi said that of this gentleman, he conjures up before his mind a picture of India invaded by the Afghans from the northeast, plundered by the Gurkhas from the hills. For me, I say with Cardinal Newman, who is a famous Catholic saint, I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me. That captures, I think, the spirit that kept Gandhi going. It didn't matter how big the task was ahead of him. He focused on the next step. And I believe that when each of us feels overwhelmed by the enormity of the problems that we face in our daily lives, that our country faces, our community faces, we too can do what we can, one step at a time. in today's connected world, we can be the tiny spark that lights a candle, that helps dispel the gloom and potential doom that threatens us individually, threatens our family, threatens our institutions and our community and our nation. In closing, I should mention another of Gandhi's great abilities, or the greatness of his nature. I mentioned Cardinal Newman, and Gandhi, the fact that Gandhi could talk about him and knew about him and quote him highlights the fact that he was a searcher after truth, and he tried to learn as much as he could from all religions. And he, at his ashram, hymns were sung, and Lead Kindly Light was one of those that was sung. But there was hymns from Islam, hymns from Hinduism, Jainism, and Christianity. In fact, whichever religions have a presence in India or in the world. That religious tolerance, I think, is something all of us can practice, and all of us can do our best to enhance. At present, the world is again threatened by religious animosity. We only got to see the horrible things that have happened in Afghanistan to realize how horrific things can be. But similar things are happening in different parts of the world where religious people are being persecuted, whether it's in Myanmar or China or anywhere else. We too can bring religious tolerance and bring up our children to respect every faith, no matter whether they practice any or more than one of them. Once again, thank you very much for the honor of having me speak on this very significant event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neville, for those wonderful and kind words. And before we begin with the panel discussion on the relevance of the Gandhian values in the 21st century, we have a short musical tribute from Ultimate Global Podcast, where we will be showing you different quotes of Gandhi for 2 minutes. And in the background, we will also be playing a song, a native Indian song, which most of the people in India might be knowing for. And I can also translate that in English for you. The song says, Sabarmati ke sant tune kar diya kamal, which means in English that, O saint of Sabarmati, you gave us the freedom and you were responsible for making us independent from the colonial rule in the 20th century. So we will be listening to that for 2 minutes. And after that, we start off with the panel discussion on the relevance of the Gandhian values in the 21st century.
आंधी में भी चलती रही गांधी तेरी
Time now to move to this interesting part of the panel discussion on the relevance of the Gandhian values in the 21st century. May I request the panel speakers to turn on their cameras? And to kickstart off this discussion, I would like to ask George on this very important point that Dr. Neville also wrote. He talked about this religious tolerance and how we are missing out on this point of religious tolerance around the world, which Gandhiji valued a lot when he was alive, and he respected all forms of religions. And this very simple fact, if practiced today, can create a lot of difference in various countries, isn't it, George?
I think there's so many things that Gandhi has given the world. But this, say, religious tolerance, yes, but just tolerance, just acceptance, and more importantly, which should be viewed by many, many people here, do it without violence. Why can't we respect somebody else's point of view? Is it that damaging to us to allow somebody to have a different point of view? And as you know, Saurabh, I do a lot of training and I do mindset training. And Gandhi is in every presentation I do because he's just a wealth of brilliant concepts. And so his impact on so many people has been fantastic. But coming back to the religion part of it, my dad, who's a very wise gentleman, now at the sprightly age of 90 years of age, he said to me, if all those that believe in their God weren't fighting everybody else that believed in their God, and we actually all sat down and talked, maybe God would get a lot more support. And it's very, very true. And this is what Gandhi was sort of saying, okay, so you have a different view to me in your religious background. Let's be tolerant. Let's talk things through. What? And so yes. But look, I was delighted to be part of this because he's such a motivational person for me in my teachings to people. And I never knew until today, God bless you all, I never knew. He instilled somewhere in me one of my things that I say to people: when is enough enough? I never knew that was a Gandhiism, but I'm very proud that it is, and it's something that I've talked to people for a long, long time. Yeah.
And I want to carry forward this discussion to two students who are also joining us from UNSW. One is Kutsav Tatei. He also joined us last year for a panel discussion on Gandhi Jayanti, and he's currently an HDR student at UNSW, and also Shubham Ved, who is also quite proactive within the UNSW Business School at the moment through his contributions on the faculty board of UNSW. So I want to raise questions first to Kutsav, and the same question goes to Shubham as well. How relevant are the values of Gandhiji in today's era, according to you?
So today's Gandhian values are like eternal, right? So these values are applicable not just today. It is like very much into the future as well. So for example, let's say talk of like peace and truth, right? So there is his famous saying about finding inner peace, finding the peace within, right? So now he often highlighted the importance of inner peace, and goes on to say that once you find that inner peace, you should ensure that it is not affected by external influence, any kind of external circumstances. Now, that is one truth that cannot be changed, whether it is as an individual, and then you can expand it to your family, your friend circle, and as a country. Say, for example, let's take an example of a country with varied demography like India, right, where you see people from many religions. In fact, all religions are existent in India, right? Various classes, various sections, and if all of them exist there, they coexist. Of course, there are few isolated issues, but they coexist. Now, the question is, after a lot of efforts and over long periods of time, there is some kind of peace and equilibrium. Now, do we allow external influence to disturb that peace becomes the question. Not just in India, any other country, any country, right? So one thing is to find inner peace, and the other thing is to ensure that external circumstances should not affect the inner peace. Let it be, if you take a family, you have an equilibrium. External circumstances can change, but that should not affect your internal dynamics. So once you allow that, then the peace is not sustainable. For example, 2016, FARC and Colombia entered a peace agreement, and by end of 2020, we are already talking of some issues, popping up again, right? So it is not. Luckily, it did not deteriorate much, but that is happening, I believe, because when you allow external factors or something else to come and disturb the peace. So I think Gandhian values, he said very simple words, and in a very simple way that humans can comprehend. But the key thing is it is effective in today's world, and also for hundreds of years to come. I'm pretty sure the same values, if it is held, then there is a better chance of a sustained peace and a better way of coexistence. Thanks.
And I think the same question now also goes to Shubham as well. Considering the values that Gandhiji portrayed in terms of being self-sufficient, he also talked about women empowerment. We are still talking about women empowerment, unfortunately, in countries like Afghanistan. We are still talking about being self-sufficient. We know that a lot of countries have learned this lesson, because you're coming from a business background. So a lot of countries have considered this lesson and taken this lesson during COVID-19 pandemic, how important it is to be self-sufficient, even in this era of globalization, isn't it, Shubham?
Of course, firstly, Kaustav and Joel, like you all raised amazing points. But now coming to the relevance of Gandhian principles in today's era, Saurabh, when we talk about self-sustainability and things like these, more than ever, it is required by everyone in the world look into Gandhian principles from every light possible, right? When we talk about sustainability, again, the thing comes, when is enough enough? When people are moving towards climate change, like there's so much talk about climate change that we do not really have time to act on it. We are using solar energy, wind power, whatever it is, that we are moving towards more of sustainability, removing of plastic. All these come from Gandhi's principle as well. When is enough enough? Now, if you speak from a business point of view as well, Saurabh, we are looking at a time when, because of the pandemic, the world is under serious recession, right? People are losing employment. There's hardship that everyone is facing. Even the most developed countries in the world are at a really, really high rate of unemployment. Now, having said this, there's a very important principle that Gandhi focuses on, which is called trusteeship, right? The wealthy taking care of the not so wealthy. It talks about how the socially and economically well off people can actually help in contributing to the environment and to the countries everywhere. Now, these things, like I said, are more than ever relevant now because we do not have time. And I believe in a 1% rule, right? Whatever we are, whoever we are, as small as we can, we are, okay? We can always influence at least 1% of the crowd that we roam around, that we surround ourselves with. And if that 1% can influence another 1%, I think the world will be a much better place.
But I think that's a wonderful point, Shivam, which you're talking about 1% rule. And it's about those baby steps that you take by influencing people around you. And I think George also talks about this effect of the ripple effect that a network can have. When you start a change, you affect your network. And when they start the change, they affect their network. And that's how that ripple effect goes forward. But I want to also raise this question to George, which I think many of the critiques also raise that many of the things that Gandhiji told appear to be very simple to everyone. But in real sense, if you have to practice it in the 21st century, it might be difficult for us to do that. A lot of the things, and maybe in the practical world, it's not possible. What do you have to say in that regard? Because if you talk about being tolerance, having that religious tolerance, being non-violent, or respecting others, which most of the people have lost. In the sense, we can see what is happening in Afghanistan, what is happening around the world, isn't it, George?
Look, is it easy? Probably not. Is it possible? 100%. 100%. If there are two people in a discussion that are both committed to coming up with an outcome, anything is possible. If the same two people are in a discussion and one is not prepared to have a good outcome, nothing is possible. And if you look at Gandhi and you look at Mother Teresa, you look at Mandela, you look at a number of these people, their basic concept was start with one. And if that person starts with one, and if that person starts with one, please, I hope people don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, but COVID has given us an example of what networking can really be all about. You had 10 people infected, and they infected 15, and they infected 25. And within a couple of weeks, we're at 1,000 people. Imagine if we could infect people with love. Imagine if we could infect people with tolerance. Imagine if you were prepared to be the second in the chain or the third. Imagine if you just said, you know what, I'm just going to have an impact on a couple of people. Now, Australia is very small in population by comparison to India. Very, very small. But if every person that was in Australia just committed to impacting on 2 more people, 25 million people in Australia, that's not a bad place to start, because that's another 50, that's 75 million, 6 degrees of separation. There's probably people in this room that are a lot quicker on their maths than me. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of people being infected in a good way. But is it really that hard when we talk about equality? And you talked about women empowerment, and you mentioned Afghanistan. You don't have to leave the shores of Australia. You don't have to walk outside of the UN. The UN talked about equality for women. There was 194, I think, speakers at the UN, and I think there was 18 women that spoke out of that 190 or 180. Somebody will have the right stats for me. But I'll guarantee you there wasn't more than 20 women, and there wasn't less than 190 speakers in total. So where is the equality? Where is the empowerment? But we have to do something about that. Who's we? You, me, Shabam, Kusha. If we all started and everybody radiates out from that, it's not that hard. I don't accept that it's that hard. I just accept that a few people have to step up and do it, because that'll infect the next one. Thanks.
And also continuing with this argument, George, what you just raised, how important it is for us to spread that message of love and compassion in this era. And that's why I really respect leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, and also one of the Buddhist leaders, the 85th Dalai Lama. We all know about the preachings that he gives on compassion and love to the business leaders, to political leaders, and he wants to change the world through compassion. So that's where these kind of leaders motivate us. And also, I want to raise this question now to Kutsav, related to this factor of...
Sarab, can I just interrupt for 1 second? Because you mentioned Dalai Lama on this topic. Dalai Lama, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Between him and Gandhiism, what more do you need? Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So I was just raising a question for Kutsav, in the sense that violence has caused a lot of bloodshed in the last 100 years in terms of the world wars that we had, the civil wars that we had. And what Gandhiji also believed, that involving violence in any kind of issue has got just the potential to deviate from the original issue and create further problems. Whereas if you involve yourself in non-violent methods, you have a chance to discuss and resolve a particular issue. How do you think this particular notion of resolving the conflict just through non-violence and discussion and negotiation and diplomacy plays an important role in the world today?
Saurabh, and of course all the audience, we all know what Afghanistan has gone through, whether it is in the past with Taliban or later on with the US and NATO forces there, who went there with an idea of establishing democracy and peace. And after 2 decades of continuous war, finally the forces has to withdraw. I'm not saying it's a victory for Taliban or the people of Afghanistan, but either it's a victory. So basically, this is one point that proves very well that violence is not going to bring in the change that you want to see. And at the same time, again, I mentioned FARC in the past, in the previous question. FARC in Colombia, the far-right rebels and the government there had decades of, internal violence going on, civil wars going on. And in 2016, they could achieve peace, but of course, not yet proven sustainable, but they could achieve it and continue with that peaceful process for 4 years. And they could reach that place only through discussion, where both parties wanted to solve issue. Like George said, it's not possible with only one party willing to solve it and the other party still holding weapons. So non-violence is the only way that you can achieve sustained peace. But to achieve that through non-violence, we should also understand that it cannot be done in a one-sided fashion. It should be both sides. That means if both sides are not ready, then a mediator is required, unbiased mediator again, to make both sides understand the value of peace, and only then it is possible. So those unbiased mediators can arise from the networks like what George and Subhamar mentioned, like how you can infect people with love, right, with the thought of non-violence, and understand where the violence is stemming from, okay, and address the core issues, focus on the core issues. What are the sentiments that is being hurt? And we should also understand that from Gandhi's own life and his teachings, he has never been a person who enforced his ideology on anyone else. So very evident from his discussions with Netaji. Netaji chose a slightly different path. Mahatma Gandhi has a different view, but Gandhi never enforced his views on Netaji, and Netaji did not enforce his views on Gandhi. They both sat, they both discussed, and they both parted their ways in different directions. But the issue again, if they started enforcing each other's idea on the other person, then again the conflict rises. The question is resolving conflict, not enforcing an ideology. Accepting and also accepting to disagree, right? You can agree to disagree. There is always an option, and you can come back to the negotiation table. So this is something everyone should know. And another thing I wanted to mention is when we talk of non-violence, I think we are pretty much limiting the subject that non-violence is on others, but we should keep in mind violence unto oneself is also violence. There are 800,000 people as of 2017 statistics, 800,000 people who commit suicide every year around the world. That is one person every 40 seconds. That is also violence. So there also someone has to help them out. Okay, they should. That is another thing that every huge organization, great leaders should look at, not just violence between nations and ideologies. And I will not get into it, but I'll leave the thought open that non-violence that Gandhi has taught, Gandhi always ensured that it accounts for animals' welfare also, not just humans. His non-violence always it always takes into account violence against animals, which again it's not something achievable quick. I mean, really easily. It goes into personal habits and stuff, but that was also something that he has spoken about. Yep. So that's all I can say about non-violence here. Saurabh, thanks.
Thank you so much, Kutsav. Before I move to a final remark from all three of you, one last question, for Shubham, in fact, where it's not only about the non-violence that he preached. There were so many other things that can still be applied in today's world. One of the things was being perseverant. He showed during the India's freedom movement that how if you stick to what you are doing, you can achieve your goals. And if every millennial or every person who's listening to our show will realize that if they stick to their goals, whatever goals they might have in their life, their personal goals, professional goals, if they have the perseverance and the courage to stick to their goals, they can achieve it. This was one of them. Another one he focused was on the fact that be the change you want to see in the world. I think we touched based upon this in the quotes as well. So if you want to see and witness the change, we see a lot of people in the millennial sector who are baby boomers who just keep on shouting that this is not happening in the right way. This is not happening in the right way. But they're not ready to do. They're not ready to initiate that change. So if you want to see that change, be the change that you want to see in the world. That is another lesson that he gave. What do you think, Shubham, on the basis of, because you're also millennial, I'm also millennial, Kutsav is also in that category. Sorry, George, for letting you out of that category. What do you consider, Shubham, in the future? Because we consider ourselves as the future of the 21st century. What do you consider can be the lessons we can take out of these things that Gandhiji taught us, other than the non-violence, obviously?
That's all. I'll sort of to address that. I'll actually pick up something from what Gustav said. He very subtly mentioned something about bias, an unbiased mediator, right? Subconsciously, we all are biased people somehow, and we're not aware of our own biases. It can happen because the culture we come from our backgrounds, of our surroundings. However, it is, we all have some biases that affect the decisions we take, right? And when we talk about things like persistence, change, being the change, right? It all comes from one simple thing: empathy. When you're empathetic towards other people, when you're empathetic towards yourself, that's when you will want to make those changes as well. Because when you are showing empathy, you let go of that bias. You let go of that something that was holding you back from bringing in that change. So I believe if we can all spread a bit of empathy, we will be moving towards a progressive change. And like you said, if we all have certain dreams, we all have certain goals. And to reach there, we have to be persistent. And to be persistent, we need to let go of a lot of things. Once we can gather the courage to let go of the things that are not doing us good, probably that's when we can move forward.
Absolutely. Wonderful remarks, Shubham, on that point. I would now be passing on for a final remark from each of you before we, end this session and pass it on to Professor Jayashree to give the final vote of thanks. So starting off from George, then Kutsav and Shubham, what is one takeaway that people listening to us can take away from this particular panel discussion?
I refuse to give one, as you would expect. As you would expect, what they should take away is the need to actually visit, and even if they think they've done it once or twice, visit again what Gandhiism is all about, and to think about how they put that into play. A couple of my teachings for my clients and students: if you want to move your body, you have to move your mind first. And that resonates with the Gandhiism. And another one of my teaching: if everybody started to listen, to learn and gain understanding, not merely to draw a breath and then attack again, the world would be a better place. So I think what I want people to take away is the impact that that man has had right across many, many spectrums, and go and revisit and relearn about Gandhi.
And one of the comments that we are just getting from LinkedIn from Pinkish Patel. He says that today's reality is that everyone wants change, but nobody wants to change. So, that's the harsh reality we have, unfortunately, that we talk about changing ourselves, we talk about bringing that change. Even back in India, there was a great movement called the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, started a couple of years back. And though I'm slight critique of the prime minister, but I always appreciate some good efforts also. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was one of the good efforts, social movement started by any prime ministers. None of the prime ministers before took this initiative that if we talk about cleaning India, that can create a huge impact. And the current prime minister took that charge of raising it through his political platforms, which I really appreciate, because he knows that he has so many followers, and if he says something, all his followers will follow him. So I think, but we if we see the change, we have not seen change in a lot of cities. It has started to certain level, but again, it needs to be at the next level if we have to make such changes in our society. Moving on to Kutsar.
Saurabh, just before I go on with my comments, final remarks, I just want to say the Swachh Bharat mission, yes, Prime Minister has brought it onto the national level, but we should also know that there have been other political people like even Chandrababu Naidu. Back in 2000s, there was, program started Janmabhoomi kind of programs in Andhra Pradesh, where it was focused on cleaning, and it was focused on planting trees and stuff with the government support, especially with the help of school children, not just adults, but just high school children and students and all. So yeah, there has been consistent efforts from different sections of Indian politics to get something, some social welfare done. And moving on, again, there is not one takeaway that can be given from this panel, but what I'd suggest or what I'd say to the audience is there are few things, right? Like, I mean, from Gandhi's way of saying, you have to respect, understand, accept, appreciate, and be compassionate. Now, again, I'd say it should all start with the self, from yourself, and then you can expand it to the near circle and then expand it. So first, all of us should try to respect and appreciate what we are blessed with, understand and accept, and then be compassionate to oneself, so that you can avoid being too rough on yourself and leading to a lot of suicide tendencies or depression and all these activities. Then apply the same thing when you look at others. Appreciate what they are, accept what they are, understand them, respect their values, and be compassionate to other people. And if each of us can do it with ourselves, to immediate family and friends, and then expand it to our colleagues and work area, then slowly the world can change. But if you're not sincere to yourself, if you're not hoping for a change within, then you cannot expect a big change to happen outside you. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Passing on to Shubham now for his final remarks.
Like George and Gustav said, that we have so many things to take away from just the Gandhian principles or the philosophy and everything that we've spoken. But thinking about what he had done when he was there, he got an entire country, Bapu got an entire country out of the colonialism and gave freedom to it. Of course, there were other people involved in it. There were hundreds of freedom fighters who were involved in it. But then again, one thing, if you focus on, it didn't happen overnight. It did not happen overnight. There were steps, there were thousands of steps which were taken. So, if you want to take one thing away from this, always remember, never underestimate baby steps. Never underestimate it. I'll leave that.
Thank you so much, Shubham. And with this, we also come to an end to this panel discussion. And we are left with now two exciting things. One is a musical tribute to Gandhiji on his favorite song, which he used to sing while he was alive. In Hindi, that song, or in his language, the song means Vaishnava Janato Tene Kahiye, which in English will be translated as one who is a Vaishnav, knows the pain of others, does good to others without letting pride enter his mind. So we will be going through that video where you can also see the actual footage of Gandhiji when he was alive. And thank you so much to all the panelists for being present today. And we will be ending with that song and Professor Jayashree's thank you note. Thank you so much to all the panelists.
Thank you so much, sir.
सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे निंदा ना करेगी नीरे निंदा ना करेगी नीरे बाज काज मना निश्चल राखे बाज काज मना निश्चल राखे धन धन जननी तेनी रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी पर स्त्री जी ने मात रे पर स्त्री जी ने मात रे जीवा थकी असत न बोले जीवा थकी असत्य न बोले पर धन नव जाले हाथ रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही
Hello, everyone. It is my privilege to deliver this vote of thanks on this important occasion of Gandhiji's birth anniversary. On behalf of everyone here, I extend my heartfelt and sincere thanks to our Vice Chancellor and the Consul General of India in Sydney for their video messages. A big thanks to you, Amit sir, for supporting this event and delivering the opening remarks. You touched on Gandhiji's quotes and how those simple precepts are critical to human life. Our deepest sense of appreciation also goes to you, sir, for initiating this idea of the virtual event last year and ensuring to continue to keep up this tradition. Thank you, sir, for your thoughtful guidance and for being available every time while organizing this program. It is my pleasure to thank our chief guest, Dr. Neville Roche, for his speech and sparing time to grace the occasion. Thank you, sir, for your inspiring thoughts of the Mahatma. The panel members are the crown of this program: Saurabh, Shubham, Kutsav, and George. Your ideas and discussions flowed naturally, and we could see the deep connection you all have with Gandhiji's values and their relevance in the present world. I'm sure all of us learn more about Gandhiji, especially looking for a change within first before we wish to change outside. Well done, panelists. Thanks to Saurabh for immersing us in music with Gandhiji's quotes and his video footage. Events like this cannot happen overnight. The wheel started rolling a few weeks ago, and we have been fortunate enough to be backed up by a team of motivated and dedicated students like Saurabh, taking the lead, UNSW India team helping us with marketing the event, and the ultimate global podcast creating the live event options. Finally, the success of the event is mainly because of the participation of everyone present here. I cannot thank you all enough for joining this virtual event in spite of your increased screen time since last year. I would like to finish by this quote of Gandhiji: "We may stumble and fall, but shall rise again." It should be enough if we did not run away from the battle. I'm sure these words of Gandhiji will inspire us to manage, especially at this time of the pandemic. Jai Hind.